What would you do if the millionaire who abandoned you under pressure from his mother discovers 7 years later that he has twin children with you, a family divided by power and control, a woman who rebuilt everything from scratch, and a matriarch willing to do anything for her legacy? Where are you from, and how would you react in this situation? Tell me in the comments, subscribe to my channel and leave a like if you want to know this redemption story where the true legacy isn't in money but in love. The Calloway estate sprawled across 5 acres of meticulously manicured land, its stone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun like a fortress of old wealth and even older secrets. Inside the West Wing sitting room, Bryn Calloway perched on the edge of an antique settee, her fingers tracing nervous patterns on the silk upholstery. At 32, she still felt like an outsider in this mansion, despite 3 years of marriage to Lawson Calloway. "The doctor says there's nothing wrong with either of us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These things just take time." Across from her, Vivian Calloway's expression remained impassive, though her knuckles whitened around her teacup. At 68, the Calloway matriarch commanded the room with the same authority she wielded over her family's century-old shipping empire. "Time," Vivian repeated, setting down her cup with practiced precision. "Time is precisely what the Calloway legacy doesn't have, my dear. Every generation has produced an heir within the first year of marriage. Every generation, except, it seems, my sons." Bryn swallowed hard, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on her shoulders. She glanced toward her husband, silently pleading for support. Lawson Calloway stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tall frame silhouetted against the garden view. At 36, he bore the distinguished features that had graced Calloway men for generations: strong jaw, penetrating blue eyes, and an air of quiet authority. But in his mother's presence, that authority always seemed to dim. "Mother," he said, turning. "Finally." "This isn't helping." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "What would help, Lawson, is ensuring that what your grandfather built, what your father preserved, and what I've expanded, doesn't end with you." She rose gracefully, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her tailored suit. "I've arranged for an appointment with Dr. Westfield. He's more progressive in his approaches." "We already have a doctor," Bryn protested softly. "Yes," Vivian replied, her gaze sweeping over Bryn's simple dress, the one concession to comfort she'd allowed herself today. "And after 3 years, what has that accomplished?" As Vivian glided from the room, Bryn felt the familiar burn of tears. She blinked them back, refusing to cry in this house where weakness was catalogued and remembered. Lawson crossed to her, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder, a gesture so tentative it might have been imagined. "She means well," he said, the same words he'd been repeating throughout their marriage. Bryn looked up at him, searching his face for any sign that he might finally stand against the current that had been pulling them apart. Instead, she saw only conflict and resignation. "Does she?" Bryn asked. She rose from the settee suddenly, needing air that wasn't perfumed with Vivian's signature scent. Or does she simply want what she wants regardless of the cost? As she walked toward the door, Bryn caught her reflection in a gilded mirror, a woman increasingly becoming a stranger to herself. Behind her, Lawson remained silent, trapped between the woman he'd chosen and the woman who'd shaped him. Outside the sitting room door, Bryn paused, hearing Vivian's voice from the adjacent study. "It was a mistake," the matriarch said to someone on the phone. "The girl was never Calloway material. We need to consider other options before it's too late." Bryn's heart thundered in her chest as she realized with sudden clarity in this battle for Lawson's soul, Vivian had just declared war. The autumn storm lashed against the windows of Lawson's private study, nature's fury a pale reflection of the tempest raging inside. Bryn stood before him, her face pale but resolute. "She actually said that—" Lawson's voice was tight with disbelief. "You must have misunderstood. Consider other options." Bryn repeated the words like shards of glass in her mouth. After suggesting yet another fertility specialist, "What do you think she meant, Lawson?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar to Bryn that she could anticipate it before it happened. 3 years of marriage had taught her the choreography of his distress. She wouldn't suggest divorce, he said, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Bryn laughed a hollow sound. Wouldn't she? Your mother has been orchestrating my exit since the day you brought me home. The truth of it hung between them, too substantial to deny. Bryn hadn't been chosen from Vivian's carefully curated list of suitable matches. She had been a surprise. The assistant art curator Lawson had met at a gallery opening, whose laughter had pierced through the practiced politeness of his world. Lawson moved to the bar cart, pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. You don't know her like I do, he said after a long swallow. Mother is protective of what we've built. What she's built, Bryn corrected gently. When was the last time you made a decision about the company that wasn't first filtered through her? His jaw tightened. That's unfair. Is it? Bryn stepped closer, her heart aching for the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd once whispered dreams of escaping the Calloway legacy, of building something that was uniquely theirs. When we met, you talked about leaving all this, opening that architect firm you've dreamed of since college. Dreams change, he said flatly. No, Lawson. Dreams get suffocated. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythmic tapping of rain. Bryn watched her husband, this man caught between duty and desire, and wondered if there was anything left of the person who had once promised to choose her always. The study door opened without a knock, and Vivian entered like a cold front. Her gaze swept over the scene, Bryn's evident distress, Lawson's drink, the palpable tension, and her lips curved in what might have passed for concern. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said smoothly. Actually, Mother, Lawson began, but Vivian continued as if he hadn't spoken. Hamilton just called. The Singapore deal is wavering. They're requesting a meeting. Her focus shifted exclusively to her son. Tomorrow morning, I've arranged the jet. Bryn watched the transformation, the slight straightening of Lawson's shoulders, the sharpening of his gaze, the corporate air displacing the conflicted husband. I can't leave tomorrow, he said, glancing at Bryn. We were going to discuss. The future of Calloway shipping is at stake, Vivian cut in. Thousands of employees depend on this deal. The weight of responsibility settled visibly on Lawson's features. Bryn knew then what his choice would be, what it had always been. Vivian turned to Bryn, her expression softening to something almost sympathetic. My dear, while Lawson is away, perhaps we should discuss your situation. The pause was deliberate. I think we both want what's best for him. After Vivian departed, Lawson moved to embrace Bryn, but she stepped back, creating distance that felt simultaneously like inches and miles. She's going to make you choose, Bryn said softly, and I'm afraid I already know your answer. As she left the study, Bryn's footsteps echoed through the cavernous hallway. Behind her, she heard the gentle clink of Lawson pouring another drink, the sound of a man preparing to drown the voice of his conscience. In her bedroom, Bryn began to pack a small suitcase, certain that by the time Lawson returned from Singapore, Vivian would have convinced him that the Calloway name required sacrifices, and that Bryn would be the first of many. The divorce papers lay on the polished mahogany table like a death sentence. Bryn stared at them, her vision blurring, as she tried to comprehend how 3 years of marriage could be reduced to a stack of cold legal documents. It's generous, Harrison Gray, the Calloway family lawyer, explained with practiced detachment. The settlement includes a monthly stipend for 2 years to help you adjust. Across the table, Lawson sat rigid, his eyes fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. He hadn't properly looked at her since returning from Singapore a week ago. That was when he delivered the news their marriage was over. The Calloway legacy needed certainty. Vivian had convinced the board to make Lawson CEO with conditions. And if I contest it? Bryn asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Harrison's smile tightened. The prenuptial agreement is quite thorough. Mrs. Calloway made certain of that. Mrs. Calloway. Vivian, not Bryn. Never Bryn. Could you give us a moment, Harrison? Lawson finally spoke, his voice hollow. When the lawyer left, silence expanded between them. Outside the conference room windows, Boston's financial district gleamed in the April sunshine, oblivious to the devastation unfolding. Within, you're really doing this, Bryn said. Not a question. Lawson's gaze finally met hers, and what she saw there broke something fundamental inside her. Not cruelty or hatred. Those might have been easier to bear. Instead, she saw resignation, a man surrendering to a current too powerful to resist. "The company needs stability," he said mechanically. "The board requires assurance of succession." "The board," Bryn repeated. "Or your mother." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "This isn't just about mother. It's about responsibility, the Calloway name." "Stop." Bryn raised a hand. "At least have the decency not to hide behind your family name. This is a choice, Lawson. Your choice." He flinched. "What would you have me do, turn my back on generations of—" "Yes," the word burst from her with unexpected force. "Yes, that's exactly what you do when something is destroying you. That's what you promised when you said for better or worse." Lawson's expression hardened. "You knew who I was when you married me." "No," Bryn whispered, a terrible clarity washing over her. "I knew who you wanted to be. That man would never be sitting across from me now." She reached for the pen, signing her name with fingers that barely trembled. Each stroke severed the threads that had bound her to this man, this family, this life of beautiful imprisonment. "The house staff will help you pack your things," Lawson said, reverting to practicalities. "Harrison has arranged an apartment until—" "I don't want anything from you," Bryn interrupted. "Not an apartment, not money, nothing that bears the Calloway stamp of ownership." She stood gathering the shattered pieces of her dignity. "You think legacy is about bloodlines and bank accounts. One day you'll realize what you've sacrificed for your mother's approval, and I hope that realization doesn't destroy you." Till she paused, turning to look one last time at the man she'd loved. "Goodbye, Lawson. I hope your empire keeps you warm at night." As she walked through the austere corridors of Calloway Tower, Bryn felt strangely weightless. The security guards, awkward sympathy as he escorted her out the receptionist's carefully averted eyes, none of it touched her. She had entered this building as Bryn Calloway and was leaving as someone else, someone yet to be defined. On the busy sidewalk, she pulled out her phone and booked a one-way ticket to Seattle, a city she'd visited only once, where no one knew her name or her shame. Far from Boston, far from the Calloways, far from the wreckage of dreams that had never been hers to keep. That evening, as her flight took off, Bryn gazed down at the receding city lights and placed a protective hand over her abdomen. The nausea she'd attributed to stress suddenly took on new meaning. A suspicion, no, an intuition, bloomed within her. If she was right, she wasn't leaving Boston alone after all. The Seattle rain drummed steadily against the single window of Bryn's rented room, providing a rhythmic accompaniment to her silent tears. 6 weeks had passed since she'd left Boston, 6 weeks of rebuilding her life from scratch, in a city where the constant precipitation seemed determined to match her mood. The pregnancy test on the bathroom counter displayed 2 unmistakable lines. Positive. After 3 years of trying, the cruel irony wasn't lost on her. Now alone in a dingy boarding house room that cost half her weekly waitressing salary, she was carrying the Calloway heir, or heirs according to the ultrasound technician who had detected 2 distinct heartbeats this morning. "Twins," Bryn whispered to the empty room, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "What am I going to do with 2 of you?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Should she tell Lawson? The thought produced a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to call him, to hear him say he'd made a terrible mistake. Another part, the part that had watched him sign away their marriage without a fight, knew better. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Fennelly, her landlady, stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her substantial chest. "Rent's due. Friday," she reminded Bryn, her eyes narrowing at the pregnancy test visible on the counter. "And I don't allow children in my establishment. Noise and mess, the lot of them." After Mrs. Fennelly left, Bryn sank onto the creaking bed. One more problem to add to her growing list. She needed a better job, an apartment that accepted children, and prenatal care she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Eliza, a fellow waitress at the Bluebird Cafe. "My cousin works reception at Cascade Medical Clinic. They're hiring. Better pay benefits. Interview tomorrow, 9 a.m. if you want it. Already put in good word." Bryn stared at the message, a tiny spark of hope igniting. Benefits meant health insurance. Health insurance meant proper care for her babies. The next morning, she stood before the small mirror in her shared bathroom, carefully applying makeup to conceal the shadows under her eyes. Her one professional outfit, a navy skirt suit she'd packed during her hasty exit from the Calloway mansion, hung loosely on her frame. 6 weeks of budget meals had melted away the softness from her body, leaving her cheekbones more pronounced, her collarbones sharply defined. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "For them." The Cascade Medical Clinic occupied the first floor of a renovated brick building in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood. Inside, the reception area was bright and welcoming, a far cry from the sterile opulence of Boston's medical establishments. "Just be yourself," Eliza's cousin Janie had advised, before leading Bryn to the office of Martin Walsh, the clinic's administrator. Martin, a kind-faced man in his 50s, reviewed her resume with interest. Art history degree from Wellesley, 3 years as assistant curator at the Gardner Museum. He looked up. Impressive, but not exactly medical experience. Bryn leaned forward slightly. "What I lack in specific experience, I make up for in adaptability. I'm organized, detail-oriented, and I genuinely care about people. The Gardner taught me how to manage complex scheduling systems and handle everyone from demanding donors to confused tourists." Martin seemed to consider this. "And you've recently relocated from Boston?" Bryn's throat tightened. "Yes, for personal reasons." Something in her expression must have communicated more than her words, because Martin's eyes softened. "Well, we do need someone immediately. Janie speaks highly of you, and I've learned to trust her judgment of character." As they discussed salary and scheduling, Bryn felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks possibility. The clinic's health insurance would begin after 3 months, just in time for her advancing pregnancy. "One last thing," Martin said as the interview concluded. "We're a small team here, more like family than colleagues. Whatever you left behind in Boston stays there. Here you get a fresh start." Walking out with a job offer and a start date for the following Monday, Bryn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. In the bustling clinic waiting room, her attention was drawn to a tall man kneeling beside an elderly patient, speaking with such gentle attention that the woman's anxious expression gradually eased. "That's Dr. Griffin Fletcher," Janie whispered, noticing Bryn's gaze. "Family medicine. Patients would wait months just to see him." As if sensing their attention, Dr. Fletcher glanced up. His eyes, a warm hazel framed by subtle laugh lines, met Bryn's briefly. He nodded in acknowledgement before returning his attention to his patient. Something about that simple moment, the doctor's evident compassion, Janie's friendly arm around her shoulders, the promise of stability, made Bryn's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. That evening in her small room, Bryn wrote in the journal she'd started keeping since arriving in Seattle. "Today I got a job, a real job with benefits. Today I found an apartment listing that might work. Today I saw kindness in a stranger's eyes and remembered that good people exist outside the Calloway orbit. Today I decided I won't tell Lawson about the babies. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The Calloway legacy nearly destroyed me. I won't let it touch my children." As she set down her pen, Bryn's phone lit up with a Boston number she didn't recognize. For a moment her heart stuttered. Lawson. But when she answered, the voice belonged to Harrison Gray. Ms. Mitchell, the lawyer corrected himself. "I'm calling to inform you that the divorce has been finalized. The first payment will be transferred tomorrow." After hanging up, Bryn stood at her small window, watching Seattle's lights blur through the rain-streaked glass. Divorced. Pregnant. With twins. Starting over at 32 in a city where she knew almost no one. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else was taking root: determination. The Calloway wealth and influence had failed to give her what she truly wanted. Perhaps here, with nothing but her own strength and the lives growing inside her, she might finally find it. She placed both hands on her abdomen, making a silent promise to the tiny heartbeats beneath her fingers. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Milo Elliott. 5 minutes before we need to leave, Bryn called up the narrow staircase of their modest craftsman bungalow. 7 years had transformed the frightened pregnant woman into someone stronger, Someone who managed the barely controlled chaos of raising twin boys with a mixture of exhaustion and fierce joy. "Calming, Mom." Two identical voices chorused, followed by the thunder of small feet. The boys burst into the kitchen like a storm, all gangly limbs and uncontainable energy. At 6.5, they were mirror images of their father, the same piercing. Blue eyes, the same strong jawline softened by childhood roundness. Only their personalities distinguished them. Milo, the thoughtful observer, Elliot, the fearless adventurer. "Griffin said he'd take us fishing on Saturday if it doesn't rain," Elliot announced, reaching for the toast Bryn had prepared. "Dr. Fletcher," Bryn corrected gently, though the reminder was becoming more perfunctory with each passing month. Her relationship with Griffin had evolved gradually over 4 years, from colleague to friend to something deeper. Now he was as much a part of their family as if he'd been there from the beginning. "But he said we could call him Griffin when it's not at the clinic," Milo pointed out, ever attentive to nuance. Bryn smiled, ruffling his dark hair. "You're right. I'm still getting used to it." The truth was more complicated. Griffin had become essential to their lives. The man who taught the boys to ride bikes, who brought soup when they were sick, who looked at Bryn as though she was something precious rather than inadequate. Yet some part of her still hesitated at the threshold of complete trust, as if waiting for this happiness to be revealed as temporary. As they piled into Bryn's modest sedan for the school run, she glanced in the rearview mirror at her sons. Every day they looked more like Lawson, a fact that simultaneously pierced her heart and strengthened her resolve to keep them far from the Calloway influence. She had never told Lawson about the twins. The monthly payments from the divorce settlement had stopped after 2 years as specified, and with them the last tenuous connection to her former life. Sometimes, in quiet moments, guilt whispered that her children deserved to know their father, that Lawson deserved to know his sons, but then she would remember his choice, his surrender to Vivian's manipulations, and the whispers would fade. After dropping the boys at school, Bryn headed to Cascade Medical, where she had risen from receptionist to office manager over the years. The clinic had become a second home, its staff the extended family her children needed. "Morning, beautiful," Griffin greeted her as she entered, pressing a coffee into her hands. At 42, his sandy hair was beginning to silver at the temples, lending him an air of distinguished warmth that made Bryn's heart flutter embarrassingly, even after all this time. "The boys are excited about fishing," she said, accepting both. The coffee and the quick kiss he dropped on her forehead. "So am I." His expression grew more serious. "Bryn, about the conversation we started last weekend?" She knew what he meant. Griffin had broached the subject of formally adopting the twins when they eventually married. The idea filled her with conflicting emotions. "I haven't found the right moment to talk to them," she admitted. Griffin's eyes, always so patient, so understanding, held hers. "There is no perfect moment for big conversations, but they're asking questions, Bryn, about their father, about us." "I know," she sighed. "It's just—" The clinic door chimed, announcing the day's first patients, and the conversation was shelved once more. That evening, after homework and dinner, after Griffin had gone home with promises to call later, Bryn sat on the porch swing, watching her sons play in the small backyard. The Seattle spring had brought a rare clear day, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the grass. Her phone buzzed with a text from Janie. "Turn on Channel 8, News. Now." Puzzled, Bryn switched on the ancient television in the living room. The screen filled with a familiar face, Lawson Calloway standing at a podium. The caption read, "Calloway Shipping announces major West Coast expansion." Bryn's blood turned to ice as the newscaster explained that Calloway Shipping was opening, headquarters in Seattle, with CEO Lawson Calloway personally overseeing the expansion. Lawson looked different, more lines around his eyes, a new hardness to his expression. Yet the camera caught something else when he smiled at a question, a fleeting vulnerability that Bryn recognized all too well. Beside him stood a slender woman with auburn hair identified as Thea Calloway wife. She held the hand of a small girl, perhaps 4 years old, with Vivian's aristocratic features softened by childhood innocence. He remarried. He has a daughter. The realization shouldn't have hurt after all this time, but it did. Not from lingering love, but from the unfairness that Lawson had moved forward, carrying none of the consequences of his choices. As the news segment ended, Bryn stepped onto the porch trying to steady her breathing. Seattle had been her sanctuary, the place where the Calloway name held no power. Now that name was coming to her doorstep. "Mom?" Milo appeared at her side, his intuitive nature sensing her distress. "Are you okay?" Bryn pulled him close, breathing in the scent of grass and boyhood. "Yes, sweetheart. Just thinking about grown-up things." "Like marrying Dr. Griffin?" Elliot asked, materializing beside his brother with their uncanny twin synchronicity. The question caught her off guard. "What makes you ask that?" The boys exchanged one of their silent communications. "He makes you smile," Milo said simply, "and he taught us to throw a curveball." "Important qualifications," Bryn acknowledged with a small laugh. "But sometimes you look sad when you think no one's watching." Elliot added his perceptiveness, both a gift and a complication. "Is it because of our real dad?" The question hung in the twilight air. Bryn had told them the simplified version. Their father hadn't been ready for a family, so it was just the three of them, until Griffin came along. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Before she could formulate a response, a car turned onto their quiet street, an expensive black SUV that moved with deliberate slowness past their house. Through the tinted windows, Bryn couldn't see the driver, but a chill of premonition crawled up her spine. "Time for baths," she said, ushering the boys inside. As they grumbled their way upstairs, Bryn locked the front door and closed all the blinds, feeling foolish, even as she did so. Seattle was a big city. The chances of running into Lawson were slim. Yet as she moved through the familiar routines of bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, Bryn couldn't shake the sensation of worlds colliding, the life she'd built with careful determination intersecting with the past she'd tried so hard to escape. Later, after the boys were asleep, she called Griffin and told him about the news broadcast. "What are the chances?" she whispered, curled on her couch in the dark. "Seattle's a big city." Griffin echoed her earlier thought, but his tone suggested he understood her fear. "But if you're worried, maybe it's time to tell the boys a bit more. And maybe it's time to make some decisions about our future." After they hung up, Bryn sat in the quiet house listening to the subtle creaks and settling sounds that had become the soundtrack of her hard-won independence. Outside, somewhere in this same city, Lawson Calloway was beginning a new chapter of the legacy that had always meant more to him than she did. Let him have his empire, she thought with sudden fierceness. "I have something far more valuable." She climbed the stairs to the boys' bedroom, watching their peaceful faces in the glow of the nightlight. Whatever came next, she would protect them, not just from Vivian's manipulation or Lawson's weakness, but from the burden of a legacy built on control rather than love. In the morning, she would call a family law attorney, just in case. Volunteer Park stretched before them in emerald splendor, the Saturday sunshine having lured half of Seattle outdoors after weeks of rain. Griffin tossed a baseball with the twins, while Bryn spread their picnic lunch on a checkered blanket, trying to ignore the persistent anxiety that had shadowed her since learning of Lawson's arrival in the city. 3 weeks had passed without incident. No more mysterious SUVs, no unexpected encounters. Perhaps her fears were unfounded. Seattle had nearly 750,000 residents after all. "Mom, watch this," Elliot called before attempting a dramatic diving catch that resulted in grass stains across his jeans. Bryn laughed, the sound loosening some of the tension she'd been carrying. "Impressive, but those stains are all yours to scrub, young man." Griffin jogged over, dropping onto the blanket beside her. "Your sons are trying to wear me out," he said, accepting the sandwich she offered. "I think it's working." "My sons when they're exhausting, our sons when they're adorable," Bryn teased, leaning into him. "I see how it works." His arm slipped around her waist and she felt his smile against her hair. "Speaking of ours, have you thought more about what we discussed?" Bryn watched the twins, now engaged in an improvised game involving complex rules they appeared to be inventing on the fly. "I have," she admitted. I think it's time." Griffin's eyes lit up. "Really?" Really, she nodded, surprising herself with how right it felt. The boys adore you. I more than adore you. And you're right, they deserve stability officially. So that's a yes to moving in together, Griffin clarified. And eventually? Yes, Bryn said simply. To all of it. His kiss was gentle, full of promise. When they separated, Bryn caught sight of Milo watching them with a small, satisfied smile before he turned back to his game. Ice cream, Elliot suddenly shouted, pointing toward a vendor's cart near the park's central pathway. After lunch, Bryn called back, but Griffin was already on his feet. I'll take them, he offered. Consider it practice for fatherhood. Balancing. Nutrition with bribery is a key skill. As Griffin jogged toward the boys, Bryn felt a contentment so complete it was almost frightening. 7 years of struggle and uncertainty had led to this moment. A good man who loved her and her children, a career that fulfilled her, and the hard-won knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. She was gathering their empty containers. When she heard it, a laugh so achingly familiar that her hands froze mid-motion. Slowly she turned toward the sound. Lawson Calloway stood 30 feet away on the park path, one hand holding a coffee cup, the other resting on the shoulder of a small girl with auburn braids. Beside him, the woman from the news broadcast, Thea, was saying something that made him laugh again, his head tipping back in that particular way Bryn had once known by heart. Time seemed to slow as Bryn calculated her options. If she moved, quickly she could gather the boys and Griffin and leave through the park's west entrance. Lawson hadn't seen her yet. There was still a chance to— Mom, look what I can do. Elliot's voice carried across the open space as he balanced precariously on Griffin's shoulders. Lawson's head turned at the sound, his gaze sweeping past Bryn, then jerking back in recognition. For an endless moment they stared at each other across the expanse of sunlit grass. Former husband and wife, now strangers with a shared history, neither had fully escaped. Bryn saw the exact instant when Lawson's attention shifted from her to the twins. She watched the color drain from his face, watched his mouth form a word that might have been impossible. Thea noticed his distress following his gaze with confusion. The little girl, oblivious to the drama unfolding, tugged at her father's hand, asking for something Bryn couldn't hear. Griffin and the boys were returning ice cream cones in hand, unaware of the seismic shift occurring just yards away. Bryn stood her legs unsteady, positioning herself between her family and Lawson. Bryn! Griffin's voice held concern as he reached her side. You look like you've seen a ghost. Before she could respond, Lawson was moving toward them, his expression a complex mixture of shock, disbelief, and something that might have been hope. Bryn, he said when he reached them, his voice exactly as she remembered. I thought you'd left Boston. I did. Her own voice sounded distant to her ears. 7 years ago. His gaze moved to the twins who had instinctively shifted closer, to Griffin, sensing the sudden tension. Milo, ever observant, looked between his mother and this stranger with growing comprehension. These are— Lawson couldn't finish the question. Bryn felt Griffin's hand at the small of her back, steady, supportive. My sons, she said, Milo and Elliot. Lawson's face crumpled for an instant before he mastered himself. How old are they? 6, she answered, knowing what he was calculating. Nearly 7. Thea had joined them now, the little girl's hand firmly in hers. Lawson. Her voice held a question. Is everything all right? He didn't respond, his attention fixed on the twins. Bryn saw what he was seeing, his own eyes staring. Back at him, his own features replicated in miniature the undeniable evidence of what she had kept from him. They're mine, he said, not a question, but a realization, spoken aloud. Griffin's hand tightened slightly on Bryn's back. The twins looked up in confusion. Mom? Milo asked, his perceptive gaze moving between the adults. Bryn knelt before her sons, her back to Lawson. It's okay, she assured them quietly. This is an old friend from Boston. We're just surprised to see each other. When she stood, Lawson's expression had hardened into something more familiar, the corporate mask he'd worn during their divorce proceedings. We need to talk, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Bryn felt a surge of the old fear, the Sense of being controlled, of decisions being made for her, rather than with her. But she wasn't that woman anymore. "Not here," she said firmly, "not now. You kept my sons from me for 7 years." Lawson's voice rose slightly. "I think that warrants an immediate conversation." Thea placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Lawson, the children," she murmured, glancing meaningfully at both sets of bewildered young faces. He took a deep breath, visibly composing himself. "Fine, but we'll talk, Bryn, soon." He reached into his pocket, extracting a business card. "My personal number. Call me today." As Lawson turned to leave, Elliot, impulsive, fearless Elliot, stepped forward. "Why does that man look like us, Mom?" The innocent question hung in the park air, unanswerable in its simplicity. Lawson froze his back to them, his shoulders suddenly rigid. "We should go," Griffin suggested quietly, already gathering their picnic things. The walk to the car passed in tense silence. Once the twins were buckled in the back seat, Bryn leaned against the passenger door, suddenly exhausted. "That was him, wasn't it?" Griffin asked softly. "Their father." Bryn nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. "You need to call him," Griffin said, surprising her. "If not for your sake, or his, then for the boys." As they drove home, Bryn clutched Lawson's business card, the embossed Callaway shipping logo seeming to burn against her fingers. 7 years of careful separation had just collapsed in an instant, and the fortress of safety she'd built around her sons now had a crack running through its foundation. In the back seat, Milo whispered something to his brother, both their gazes fixed on the adults in the front. Bryn caught the word in the rearview mirror, spoken with the innocent devastation that only children can deliver, "Dad." The twins were finally asleep, after an evening filled with questions Bryn had deflected as gently as possible. Griffin had left reluctantly, understanding her need for space, but clearly concerned about leaving her alone with the weight of the day's events. Now, sitting at her small kitchen table, Bryn stared at Lawson's business card beside her phone. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter of rain that had begun at sunset. With a steadying breath, she dialed the number. Lawson answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting with the phone in hand. "Bryn." Her name in his voice still produced an echo of old pain. "We need ground rules for this conversation," she said without preamble. A pause. "All right. I won't justify my choices to you, I won't be made to feel guilty, and I won't allow you to threaten legal action as an opening gambit." His laugh held no humor. "You've changed. Raising twins alone will do that," she replied evenly. Another pause, longer this time. Are they healthy, happy?" The question, so human, so paternal, caught her off guard. "Yes," she said more softly. "They're wonderful, Lawson. Smart kind, full of energy. Elliot is fearless, always first to try something new. Milo notices everything, feels everything deeply." "Like you," Lawson murmured. Bryn swallowed hard. "And they look exactly like you." "I saw that." His voice wavered slightly. "When were you going to tell me?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe when they turned 18, maybe never." "I had a right to know." The words emerged clipped, controlled, but Bryn could hear the fury building beneath them. "Like I had a right to be treated as more than an inconvenience when I couldn't produce an heir fast enough," she countered. "How you chose your mother and the Callaway legacy over me, Lawson. Why would I give her access to my children?" "Our children," he corrected sharply. "And this isn't about my mother." "It was always about your mother," Bryn said wearily. "Every decision you made was filtered through what Vivian would approve." Silence stretched between them, filled with 7 years of unspoken recriminations and regrets. "I want to meet them," Lawson finally said. "Properly. I want to be part of their lives." Bryn closed her eyes. She had anticipated this, of course, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that turned her stomach with anxiety. "They don't know about you," she said quietly. "Not really. I've told them their father wasn't ready for a family. And now they've seen me," Lawson concluded. "They know what I look like. They're going to have questions, and yes, questions that you'll have to answer, because if you don't, I will." The implied threat hung in the air. Bryn's fingers tightened around the phone. "Is that how you want to start this, Lawson, with ultimatums?" He sighed, and she could picture him running a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration. "No, I'm sorry, I'm still processing 7 years, Bryn, 7 years of their lives that I can never get back." "And whose fault is that?" The words escaped before she could temper them. "Mine," he acknowledged, surprising her. "At least partly. But keeping them from me after the divorce, that choice was yours alone." The simple truth of it was undeniable. Bryn had made that decision believing it was for the best, protecting her sons from the toxic dynamics that had destroyed her marriage. But standing on the other side of that choice, she could recognize the cost. "I'll need time," she said, "to prepare them, to explain things in a way they can understand." "How much time?" "A week," she decided. "Next Saturday. We can meet somewhere neutral, public, but quiet." "All right," Lawson agreed, then added, "And Bryn, I should tell you, my mother doesn't know I found you or about the boys." A chill ran through her. "Keep it that way, at least until I've had a chance to talk to Milo and Elliot." After hanging up, Bryn remained at the table, staring at the collection of refrigerator artwork that chronicled her son's growth. Handprints transforming into houses, stick figures, evolving into recognizable portraits. 7 years of memories that Lawson had missed. 7 years of moments that could never be recaptured. The unfairness struck her anew, not just for Lawson, but for her boys, who deserved to know where they came from, who had the right to understand. The other half of their identity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Everything okay? Want me to come back?" She typed quickly. "Talked to L. Meeting next Saturday. Boys asleep. I'm okay. Stay put." His response came immediately. "I love you, all of you, whatever happens." Those simple words brought unexpected tears. Whatever complicated feelings she still harbored for Lawson, they were echoes from another life. Griffin was her present, her future, the man who had chosen her and her children without reservation. Wiping her eyes, Bryn climbed the stairs to the twins' bedroom. They shared a room by choice, though she'd offered them separate spaces as they grew older. "We like being together," Milo had explained seriously. "It's lonely when Elle's not there." Now watching them sleep, Milo curled tightly around his favorite book. Elliot sprawled across his bed, with one arm dangling toward the floor. Bryn felt the weight of the coming conversation. How did you tell 6-year-olds that the father they believed had abandoned them was suddenly here wanting to know them? How did you explain divorce and family legacy and the complexities of adult choices to children who still believed in the tooth fairy? In his sleep, Elliot murmured something, his face momentarily creasing with some dream concern. Bryn smoothed his hair gently, and his expression relaxed. "We'll figure it out," she whispered to her sleeping sons. "We always do." Downstairs, her phone buzzed again. Expecting Griffin, she was startled to see Lawson's number. "They have my eyes, and your smile." "I saw it when Elliot laughed. Thank you for that at least." The simple observation, so personal, so careful, caught her off guard. It was a glimpse of the Lawson she'd first fallen in love with, the man who noticed details, who found beauty in small things before Vivian's influence had stripped away those softer edges. Bryn didn't respond, but she saved the message, a small acknowledgement that whatever came next wouldn't be simple for any of them. As she prepared for bed, a car drove slowly past the house, a dark SUV with tinted windows that paused briefly before continuing down the street. Coincidence, perhaps, or a reminder that once the Callaway orbit found you, it rarely let go easily. Vivian Callaway stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly established Callaway shipping headquarters, surveying Seattle's skyline with the critical eye of a conqueror assessing fresh territory. At 75, she remained a formidable presence, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture military, straight, her gaze as penetrating as ever. "The West Tower could use more Callaway branding," she remarked to Harrison Gray, who had aged alongside her as the family's most trusted legal advisor. "Something subtle but unmistakable." "I'll speak with the design team," Harrison replied, making a note on his tablet. Vivian turned from the view, moving to the large desk that dominated the corner office, Lawson's office technically, though she had no qualms about using it in his absence. "What's troubling my son Harrison?" she asked abruptly. "He's been distracted since the weekend, cancelling meetings, disappearing for hours without explanation." Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "I couldn't say, Mrs. Calloway." Vivian's thin smile didn't reach her eyes. "You've been with this family for 30 years, Harrison. You always know more than you say." Before he could respond, Vivian's personal assistant appeared at the door. "Mrs. Calloway, your son is here to see you." Lawson entered, the subtle tension in his shoulders, betraying his unease despite his impeccable appearance. At 43, he had grown into his authority, carrying himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to command. Yet, in his mother's presence, that subtle hesitation remained, a boyhood pattern he had never quite outgrown. "Mother," he greeted her, nodding to Harrison. "I need to speak with you. Alone." Harrison departed discreetly, closing the door behind him. Vivian settled into the leather chair behind the desk, gesturing for Lawson to sit. "You've been avoiding me," she observed. "The board meeting yesterday. I found Bryn." Lawson interrupted, his voice carefully controlled. Vivian's expression didn't change, but her fingers stilled on the armrest. "Your ex-wife here in Seattle?" "Yes." "Well," Vivian said after a moment, "that's unfortunate, but hardly consequential. The divorce was finalized years ago. Your life has moved on. Bryn Mitchell is irrelevant to the Calloway concerns." Lawson's jaw tightened. "She's not irrelevant, Mother. She has children. My children. Twin boys." The silence that followed was absolute. Vivian's face remained composed, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Impossible," she finally said. "She couldn't conceive. That was the whole point of—" "The point of forcing me to divorce her," Lawson finished. "Apparently, the problem wasn't Bryn's fertility. The timing was just unfortunate." Vivian rose slowly, moving to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught the afternoon light. She poured 2 fingers of whiskey with a steady hand. "How old are these alleged sons?" 6, almost 7. "And there's nothing alleged about them." "I've seen them, Mother. They look exactly like me at that age." She turned, studying him over the rim of her glass. "Have you confirmed paternity?" "I don't need a DNA test to recognize my own children," Lawson snapped, then immediately regretted the outburst. Showing emotion to Vivian had always been a tactical error. "Sentiment clouds judgment," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "If these boys are indeed Calloways, we need to approach this strategically. They're not a business acquisition," Lawson said, his voice low. "They're my sons. Sons I didn't know existed until 3 days ago." Vivian set down her glass with a decisive click. "Exactly why we need to proceed carefully. Bryn concealed their existence for nearly 7 years. That suggests motive." "What motive? She hasn't asked for anything. She doesn't even want to see me." "Yet," Vivian said meaningfully, "children are expensive, Lawson, especially as they grow older. Private school, college, establishing them in suitable careers. Bryn may have managed thus far, but sooner or later, she'll recognize the advantages of Calloway resources." Lawson closed his eyes briefly. This was exactly why he'd hesitated to tell his mother, her instinct to view every situation as a potential threat, every person as having an angle. "I'm meeting them on Saturday," he said. "Bryn is explaining things to them first." "And Thea, how does your wife feel about this development?" The question was a precision strike hitting Lawson's area of greatest uncertainty. "She processing. Concerned about Ainsley, naturally." "Naturally," Vivian echoed. "Your daughter has been the Calloway heir since birth. Now suddenly there are 2 boys with prior claim." "This isn't about inheritance," Lawson insisted. "It's about my children knowing each other, about me knowing my sons." Vivian's expression softened slightly, a calculated shift to her more maternal persona. "Of course it is, darling, I understand. I'm simply pointing out complications you may not have considered." She moved around the desk, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'd like to meet them too, Lawson. My grandsons. We should arrange something. At the house, a proper welcome to the family." Warning bells sounded in Lawson's mind. Not yet. Bryn was very clear about taking things slowly. Was she, Vivian's tone sharpened, or is she setting conditions for access to your own children? The question hit a nerve Lawson hadn't acknowledged was exposed. I need to handle this my way. Mother? As you wish, Vivian conceded, returning to her chair. But remember, these boys are Calloways. They deserve everything that name entails. The opportunities, the connections, the legacy that's rightfully theirs. After Lawson left, Vivian remained motionless for several minutes, her mind working with the efficiency that had expanded the Calloway empire beyond her husband's modest ambitions. Twins, boys, heirs she hadn't known existed. She pressed a button on the desk. Harrison, come in, please, and bring the Mitchell divorce file. When the lawyer appeared with the requested documents, Vivian was standing at the windows again, her reflection in the glass, revealing nothing of her thoughts. I need everything on Bryn Mitchell's life since leaving Boston, she instructed. Where she lives, where she works, financial status, personal relationships. Most importantly, I need details on the twin boys she's been raising, my grandsons. Harrison's expression revealed momentary surprise before he masked it. Of course, Mrs. Calloway. How soon do you need this information? Immediately, Vivian replied, and Harrison, discretion is essential. Lawson believes he needs to handle this situation personally. I see no reason to disabuse him of that notion. Just yet. After the lawyer departed, Vivian unlocked a drawer in Lawson's desk, removing a leather-bound album she'd brought from Boston. Inside were photographs chronicling the Calloway lineage, 5 generations of carefully orchestrated marriages, and strategic alliances that had built their shipping empire. Vivian traced a manicured finger over Lawson's childhood portrait, then moved to the most recent addition, Ainsley, his 4-year-old daughter, her delicate features a blend of Calloway determination and her mother's artistic sensibilities. The girl was bright, beautiful, and, until 3 days ago, the presumed future of Calloway shipping. Now that future had been complicated by the emergence of 2 boys with stronger hereditary claims. Vivian closed the album with a decisive snap. The Calloway legacy had weathered storms before, economic downturns, world wars, family scandals. This was merely another challenge to be managed, another variable to be controlled. If these boys were truly Calloways, they belonged under her influence, not raised by a woman who had never understood the responsibility that came with the name. Bryn had rejected Vivian's guidance once. She wouldn't be permitted to do so again, not with the next generation at stake. As evening fell over Seattle, Vivian made one more call. To a private investigator she'd employed during the divorce proceedings. Some situations required more creative intelligence gathering than Harrison could provide. I have a delicate matter requiring your attention, she began. It concerns my former daughter-in-law and 2 children I've only just learned about. Outside her window, lights flickered on across the city, creating a constellation of illumination against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that urban galaxy, her unknown grandsons were going about their evening routines, unaware of the plans being set in motion, plans that would ensure the Calloway legacy continued precisely as Vivian had always intended. Whatever Bryn Mitchell might believe, whatever sanctuary she thought she'd created, Vivian knew the truth: no one truly escaped the Calloway orbit. Not once she decided to pull them back in. Saturday arrived with unseasonable sunshine, as if the Seattle weather had declared a temporary truce for the momentous meeting ahead. Bryn stood in the twins' bedroom doorway, watching them get ready with unusual care. Milo methodically buttoning his favorite blue shirt, Elliot attempting to tame his perpetually unruly hair. The past week had been a crucible of difficult conversations. She had explained to the boys as simply as she could that the man they'd met in the park was their biological father, that he hadn't known about them because she'd moved away before discovering she was pregnant, that he wanted to meet them properly. Their reactions had been as different as their personalities, Elliot full of excited questions, Milo quiet and watchful, processing the revelation in his introspective way. Is he nice? Elliot asked now, abandoning his hair battle to look at Bryn. He can be, she answered honestly. He was when I first knew him. Will he be our dad now, like Griffin wants to? Milo's question cut to the heart of the matter. Bryn sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. Griffin will still be part of our family no matter what. Your father, Lawson, He wants to know you. What that looks like moving forward is something we'll all figure out together." "Does he have other kids?" Elliot asked. "A daughter, Brynny." "Confirmed. Your half-sister, her name is Ainsley." This news had produced a burst of excited chatter. The concept of a sister, even one they hadn't met, was apparently thrilling. Now as they prepared to leave for the agreed-upon meeting place, a private room at a quiet restaurant overlooking Lake Union, Bryn felt a complicated mixture of anxiety and resolution. Griffin had offered to come, but she'd declined. This first encounter needed to be just Lawson herself and the boys. The restaurant was Lawson's suggestion, and Bryn recognized the subtle Callaway influence in the choice. Upscale but not ostentatious, privately owned, rather than part of a chain, the kind of establishment where discretion was assumed rather than requested. When they arrived, a host led them to a secluded room with panoramic lake views. Lawson was already there, standing at the windows with his back to the door. He turned as they entered, and Bryn felt the twins press closer to her sides. "Hello, Bryn," Lawson said formally, then shifted his gaze to the boys. Something in his expression softened a vulnerability she'd rarely seen during their marriage. "Hello, Milo. Hello, Elliot." He'd made an effort to dress casually, dark jeans and a sweater rather than his usual corporate attire, but the effect was somewhat undermined by the obvious quality of the clothes and his natural air of authority. "Hi," Elliot ventured, while Milo offered a solemn nod. The initial awkwardness gradually eased as they settled around the table. Lawson had clearly prepared, asking age-appropriate questions about school hobbies and friends. The twins, initially hesitant, grew more animated as the conversation progressed. "I build models, too," Lawson told Milo, who had shyly mentioned his collection, of intricate ship replicas. "When I was your age, my grandfather taught me. He said understanding how something is constructed is the first step to improving it." "That's what Mom says," Elliot exclaimed. "About art, though, she says you have to know the rules before you can break them." Lawson's gaze met Bryn's briefly. "Your mother is very wise." As lunch was served, Bryn observed the subtle ways the boys mirrored Lawson without realizing it. The same slight furrow when concentrating, the same unconscious gesture when making a point. Nature asserting itself despite 7 years of separation. "Mom says you run ships," Elliot said between bites. "Of pasta, like real ones on the ocean." "Container ships, yes," Lawson replied. "They carry goods between countries, cars, clothes, food, technology, things people need." "Is it like Milo's models?" Elliot pressed. A genuine smile crossed Lawson's face. "Much bigger, but the principles are similar. Would you like to see one sometime? Not today," he added quickly, glancing at Bryn. "But perhaps in the future. Can we?" Elliot looked to his mother, eyes bright with excitement. "We'll see," Bryn said, the non-committal parent response that had saved her countless times. "I'd also like you to meet your sister," Lawson continued, carefully. "Ainsley is younger, she's 4, but she's been asking about you since I told her." Milo, who had been quietly observing throughout the meal, finally spoke directly to Lawson. "Do you love her, Ainsley?" The question, so innocent yet so profound, created a moment of startled silence. Lawson set down his fork, giving the boy his full attention. "Yes," he answered simply. "Very much." Milo nodded, absorbing this. "Griffin loves us too. He's not our dad, but he loves us anyway." Bryn held her breath, watching Lawson navigate this unexpected terrain. "That's good," he said finally. "It's important to have people who love you." As the meal concluded, Lawson presented each boy with a small, thoughtfully chosen gift for Milo, a detailed model ship kit with miniature tools for Elliot, an art set with professional quality supplies. Not extravagant enough to seem like bribery, but fine enough to be special. "There's something else I'd like to give you," Lawson said, producing a leather-bound book. "This is for both of you. It's about our family, the Callaways, where we came from, what we've done through the years." Bryn tensed, recognizing Vivian's influence in this gesture. The subtle introduction of legacy, of belonging to something beyond just Lawson himself. "Thank you," she said, accepting the book before the twins could reach for it. "We'll look at it together at home." If Lawson noticed her reservation, he didn't comment. As they prepared to leave, he knelt to eye level with the boys. "I'd like to..." See you again. Would that be all right? The twins looked to Bryn, seeking guidance. She nodded slightly, giving permission. We could go fishing with Griffin sometimes, Elliot suggested. He's teaching us. You could come too. A flicker of something. Discomfort, perhaps, or jealousy, crossed Lawson's face before he masked it. I'd like that. I'm not much of a fisherman, but I'm willing to learn. Outside the restaurant, as they prepared to part ways, Lawson drew Bryn aside while the twins examined a sculpture in the courtyard. Thank you, he said quietly. For allowing... for raising them so well. They made it easy, Bryn replied. They're good boys. They are. Lawson hesitated, then added, Bryn, I should tell you, my mother knows about them now. Cold apprehension washed over her. You told her? I had to. She's their grandmother. She's also the reason we divorced, Bryn reminded him, keeping her voice low. The reason I left Boston. Lawson's expression hardened slightly. That was a long time ago. People change. Does Vivian? Bryn challenged. Has she ever admitted being wrong about anything? He didn't answer directly. She wants to meet them. Not immediately, he added, seeing Bryn's expression. But eventually they're Callaways. They're Mitchell Callaways, Bryn corrected firmly, and they won't be meeting Vivian until I'm confident she won't try to control them the way she controlled you. A muscle ticked in Lawson's jaw. That familiar sign of frustration she remembered from their marriage. We'll discuss it another time, he said finally. This day has gone well. Let's not end it with an argument. As they said their goodbyes, Milo surprised everyone by initiating a hug with Lawson, brief but genuine. Elliot, not to be outdone, followed suit, his embrace more exuberant. Watching Lawson's expression as he held his sons for the first time, the mix of wonder, grief for the years lost, and cautious hope, Bryn felt an unexpected pang of empathy. Whatever his failings as a husband, the man before her clearly wanted to be a father to these boys. Driving home, she listened to the twins excitedly dissect every detail of the meeting, their initial wariness replaced by curious enthusiasm. They had Lawson's gifts in their laps, occasionally running their fingers over them, as if confirming their reality. Can we look at the book now? Elliot asked, as they entered their house. Bryn hesitated, then nodded. Let's all look together. The Callaway family history was beautifully presented, a tasteful chronicle of the shipping dynasty from its humble beginnings to its current global status. Vivian's hand was evident in the curation, with certain chapters devoted to Callaway values and the responsibilities of legacy. As the boys flipped through examining pictures of ancestors who shared their features, Bryn noticed one significant omission. Within the detailed family tree spanning the final pages, her own name was nowhere to be found, erased from the Callaway narrative as completely as if she'd never existed. When the twins had gone to bed that night, still buzzing with the day's events, Bryn called Griffin to update him. It went better than I expected, she admitted. Lawson was gentle with them, thoughtful. That's good, Griffin said, though she could hear the undercurrent of concern in his voice. And you? How are you feeling about all this? Bryn glanced at the Callaway family book now sitting on her coffee table like an elegant intruder. Cautious. Vivian knows about the boys now. She wants to meet them. Ah, Griffin said, understanding. Immediately. The plot thickens. She doesn't appear in the family history Lawson gave them, but her influence is all over it. All this talk of legacy and responsibility, it's exactly what she used to control Lawson. The boys are smarter than that, Griffin reminded her, and they have you as a counterbalance. After they hung up, Bryn found herself unable to sleep, her mind replaying the day's events. The meeting had gone well, perhaps too well. Lawson had been perfect, attentive, thoughtful, careful not to overwhelm. The ideal father reconnecting with his long-lost sons. Yet something nagged at her, a sense that the ease of today's encounter was merely the prelude to more complicated days ahead. The Callaway legacy was never freely given. It came with expectations, with obligations, with the subtle pressure to conform, to Vivian's vision of what a proper Callaway should be. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I wasn't aware I had great-grandsons until this week. What a delightful discovery. I do so look forward to meeting them. Family. Here's everything after all. V. A chill ran through Bryn as she stared at the message. Vivian had found her number. Vivian was reaching out directly. The battle lines were being drawn and the opening salvo had just been fired. Outside, a car engine started, the same black SUV that had been parked down the street all day. As it pulled away, Bryn stood at her window, watching its taillights disappear around the corner. The Callaway orbit was tightening, drawing her and her sons back into its gravitational field. The question was no longer if Vivian would make her move, but when and how prepared Bryn would be to counter it. The invitation arrived on embossed Callaway stationery delivered by hand to Bryn's front door on a Tuesday afternoon. Inside the heavy cream envelope, elegant calligraphy announced a family gathering to welcome Milo and Elliot Callaway at Vivian's recently acquired Seattle mansion. "I never agreed to this," Bryn said, pacing Griffin's living room that evening, the invitation clutched in her hand. It's been 3 weeks since the boys met Lawson. They've seen him twice since then, carefully planned neutral locations. And now suddenly Vivian's organizing a formal Callaway event, as if they've been part of the family all along. Griffin watched her from the couch, his expression concerned. "Have you called Lawson about it?" "He claims he didn't know in advance. Says his mother took initiative because she's excited to meet her grandsons." Bryn's air quotes conveyed her skepticism. "This is classic Vivian, creating situations where refusing makes you look unreasonable." "So don't refuse," Griffin suggested. "Counteroffer." Bryn stopped pacing. "What do you mean? Propose an alternative, something smaller on your terms." "Include me in the invitation." The suggestion was so simple, so obvious that Bryn laughed despite her frustration. "Of course. Make it a neutral meeting, not a Callaway induction ceremony." She sat beside him, leaning into his solid presence. "I haven't told you the worst part. Vivian sent identical invitations to the boys' school addressed directly to them. Their teacher mentioned it at pickup today." Griffin's eyebrows rose. "That's thorough. That's tactical," Bryn corrected. "Now they know about it. They're excited about meeting their fancy grandmother and seeing their half-sister again. If I refuse outright, I'm the villain. So we create a better option," Griffin said decisively. "A cookout here, casual, comfortable on friendly territory." The "we" wasn't lost on Bryn. Throughout this upheaval, Griffin had remained steadfast, neither threatened by Lawson's reappearance nor resentful of the complications it brought. His quiet confidence that they would navigate this together had become her anchor. Later that night, after Bryn had called Lawson to propose the alternative plan, which he had agreed to with palpable relief, she received another text from Vivian. "A backyard barbecue is hardly an appropriate welcome for Callaway heirs, but I understand your desire for comfort. Saturday at 3. I'll have my chef prepare suitable contributions. V." Reading between the lines. Bryn recognized both the concession and the assertion of control, Vivian agreeing to the change of venue while simultaneously elevating it beyond a simple gathering. "She never misses an opportunity," Bryn muttered, showing Griffin the message. "At least she's coming here," he pointed out. "Home field advantage." Saturday arrived with domestic preparations that bordered on strategic planning. Griffin's comfortable Craftsman home, with its sprawling backyard and views of Puget Sound, had been thoroughly cleaned. A long table had been set up on the deck, casual yet inviting. The twins had spent the morning helping Griffin prepare their favorite foods, their excitement about meeting their grandmother and seeing their half-sister again barely contained. "Will she like us?" Milo asked carefully, arranging cookies on a platter. "She'd be crazy not to," Griffin assured him. "You guys are the best kids I know." Bryn, overhearing this exchange, felt a rush of love for this man who had embraced her children so completely. At precisely 3 o'clock, a sleek town car pulled up to the curb. Lawson emerged first, then assisted his wife Thea and daughter Ainsley. Finally, Vivian Callaway stepped out, surveying Griffin's home with the assessing gaze of a property appraiser. Even in the casual setting, Vivian had dressed with calculated precision, linen trousers and a silk blouse in subtle cream tones accessorized, with a single strand of pearls that probably cost more than Bryn's annual salary. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, her posture regal despite her age. As the group approached the front door, Bryn steeled herself. "Ready?" she asked Griffin and the twins. "Ready." They echoed Milo's hand slipping into hers. The initial greetings were a study in careful navigation. Lawson performed introductions with the diplomatic skill of a CEO accustomed to managing difficult personalities. Thea, whom Bryn had met briefly during the boys' second meeting with Lawson, seemed genuinely warm, if slightly reserved. Ainsley immediately gravitated toward the twins, her initial shyness dissolving as Elliot showed her his collection of pet rocks. And then Bryn was face to face with Vivian Calloway for the first time in 7 years. "Bryn," Vivian acknowledged with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're looking well. Seattle clearly agrees with you." "Thank you for coming, Vivian," Bryn replied evenly. "This is Griffin Fletcher, my partner." Vivian's gaze swept over Griffin with swift assessment. "Dr. Fletcher, Lawson mentioned you're in family medicine. How nurturing." Griffin's smile remained unperturbed. "I find it rewarding. May I offer you something to drink? We have wine, sparkling water, or I make a mean lemonade that the boys helped with this morning." "Water, thank you," Vivian replied, her attention already shifting to the twins who had approached with Ainsley in tow. What followed was a masterclass in subtle influence. Vivian engaged the boys with questions that seemed innocuous, yet revealed her research. She knew their teachers' names, their favorite subjects, even the title of the book Milo had recently presented on for his reading class. "You have your father's aptitude for detail," she told Milo, her voice warming. "Lawson was the same at your age, building models, taking things apart to understand them." To Elliot she said, "That artistic streak comes from the Calloway side too. Your great-grandfather commissioned works from some of the most significant artists of his time. Perhaps you'd like to see the collection sometime." Bryn watched this performance with grudging admiration. Vivian was good, better than she remembered. No wonder Lawson had never been able to break free from her influence. As the afternoon progressed, the children drifted to the backyard where Griffin was setting up lawn games. Thea joined them, her initially reserved manner relaxing as she helped Ainsley with a beanbag toss. Lawson manned the grill, leaving Bryn momentarily alone with Vivian on the deck. "You've built a life here," Vivian observed, gesturing to encompass the home, the garden, the scene of domestic tranquility. "Quite different from what you left behind." "Yes," Bryn agreed simply, "it is." The boys seemed happy, well adjusted despite the unusual circumstances. Vivian sipped her water. "You've done well by them in your way." Coming from Vivian, this was practically effusive praise. Bryn inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the compliment without responding to its subtle qualification. "Of course," Vivian continued, "as they grow older, certain advantages will become increasingly important. Educational opportunities, social connections, access to the kind of experiences that shape exceptional young men." And there it was, the implied inadequacy of what Bryn could provide compared to what the Calloway name offered. "The boys have everything they need," Bryn said firmly, "including people who love them for who they are, not for their potential utility to a family legacy." Vivian's smile tightened fractionally. "Love is essential, of course, but so is preparation for the responsibilities they'll inherit. The Calloway Foundation's Educational Trust was established precisely for this purpose." "They already have college funds," Bryn countered. "Griffin and I have been contributing since we—" "A doctor's salary and a clinic manager's earnings," Vivian interrupted gently. "Admirable, but hardly sufficient for the caliber of education Calloway heirs traditionally receive." Before Bryn could respond, Milo appeared at the deck steps. "Dad says the food's ready," he announced, then froze suddenly, uncertain. Lawson says—" "Dad is fine, darling," Vivian assured him with a warm smile. "He is your father, after all. Family titles are important. They help us understand who we are to each other." Milo glanced at Bryn, clearly conflicted. "Mom, whatever you're comfortable with, sweetheart," Bryn told him, deliberately contradicting Vivian's certainty. "There's no rush to figure it all out." As they joined the others for the meal, Bryn noticed Vivian observing Griffin's interactions with the twins, the easy rapport, the inside jokes, the natural authority tempered with affection. If she was bothered by this evidence of another man's paternal role in her grandsons' lives, she concealed it perfectly. The conversation flowed more easily than Bryn had anticipated. Thea, it emerged, was an art restoration specialist, a connection. That gave Bryn and her common ground. Lawson shared amusing stories from the twins' age that made the boys giggle and ask for more. Even Vivian contributed, describing a young Lawson's determination to build a tree house despite having no carpentry skills whatsoever. "Your grandfather finally took pity on him," she told the twins, her expression softening with genuine reminiscence. "He hired a proper carpenter, but insisted Lawson work alongside him, learning as they built. That treehouse stood for 20 years. "We want a treehouse," Elliot exclaimed, looking between Griffin and Lawson with transparent hope. "That big maple would work," Griffin mused, pointing to a sturdy tree at the edge of the yard. "I know a good contractor," Lawson offered, meeting Griffin's gaze directly for perhaps the first time. The moment of connection between the two men, brief but significant, didn't escape Bryn's notice, nor, she suspected, did it escape Vivian's. As the gathering wound down, Vivian presented each boy with a gift leather-bound journals, embossed with their initials accompanied by fountain pens of obvious quality. "For your thoughts, your dreams, your ideas," she told them. "Callaway men have kept such journals for generations. Your great-grandfather's diaries are in the family archive." The gesture was perfectly calibrated, meaningful without being ostentatious, educational rather than merely indulgent. Bryn couldn't have objected without seeming petty. As the Callaway contingent prepared to leave, Vivian took Bryn aside. "I'd like to host Milo and Elliot for a weekend at my home," she said without preamble, "to spend time with Ainsley, to get to know their heritage more deeply." "That's moving rather quickly," Bryn responded carefully. "Time is precious at my age," Vivian countered, "and 7 years have already been lost." The subtle accusation hung in the air between them. Bryn met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I'll consider it. After they've had more time with Lawson, with Thea, with Ainsley. Building relationships can't be rushed, Vivian, especially with children." Something flickered in Vivian's eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or grudging respect. "You've grown quite confident since Boston," she observed. "Motherhood suits you better than being a Callaway wife did." "Yes," Bryn agreed simply. "It does." After the Callaways had departed, Bryn found Griffin in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. "That went not terribly," he said, offering her a glass of wine. Bryn took it gratefully. "Vivian's playing a long game. Today was just opening moves. What does she want ultimately?" "The same thing she's always wanted," Bryn sighed. "Control. Influence over the next generation. Continuation of the Callaway legacy exactly as she envisions it." "And Lawson, where does he stand in all this?" Bryn swirled the wine in her glass, considering. "In the middle as always. He wants a relationship with the boys, but he's still tethered to her expectations, still trying to navigate between what he wants and what she demands." Later, after the twins were in bed, still chattering about their other family, Griffin held Bryn close on the porch swing, the evening air cool against their skin. "Whatever happens with the Callaways," he murmured, "we're solid. You know that, right?" Bryn nodded against his shoulder. "I do, but I'm afraid this is just the beginning. Vivian doesn't stop until she gets what she wants." "Neither do you," Griffin pointed out, "and you have one advantage she doesn't." "What's that?" "You know what it's like to be under her influence. You escaped it." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That makes you dangerous to her in a way she may not fully appreciate yet." As they sat in comfortable silence watching stars emerge above the sound, Bryn's phone buzzed with a text from Lawson. "Thea and I enjoyed today. The boys are wonderful. Mother has many opinions as usual, but this is between us, you, me, and our sons. I won't let her dictate terms." The message surprised her. It was more direct opposition to Vivian than Lawson had managed during their entire marriage. Perhaps parenthood had given him a strength she hadn't witnessed before, or perhaps 7 years had allowed him to grow in ways she hadn't been present to see. Either way, as she showed the message to Griffin, Bryn felt the first tentative stirrings of hope that this complex family reconfiguration might eventually find a sustainable balance, one where the Callaway legacy existed as an option for her, Son's not an obligation. What she didn't know was that at that very moment in Vivian's lakeside mansion, the Calloway matriarch was reviewing documents prepared by her legal team, documents outlining potential custody arrangements, educational, trusts with specific conditions and detailed analyses of Washington state family law, as it pertained to previously unknown paternity. The opening moves had indeed been made. The middle game was yet to come. "I don't understand why we can't go," Elliot complained, his expression hovering between confusion and defiance. "Dad said it's the biggest ship in their whole fleet. He said—" "We could see the captain's bridge and everything." Bryn took a steadying breath. It was the third such conversation in as many days ever since Lawson had mentioned the upcoming christening ceremony for Calloway Shipping's newest container vessel. A major company event with press coverage and international business partners in attendance. "It's not that you can't ever see the ship," she explained patiently. "It's that this particular event isn't appropriate. It's a business function, not a family outing." "But we are family," Milo pointed out quietly. "Grandmother Vivian said so." The title, Grandmother Vivian, still caused Bryn's jaw to tighten involuntarily. In the 2 months since the backyard gathering, Vivian's influence had expanded in small but significant ways. Weekly dinners at Lawson's home had become routine. Gifts appeared with strategic regularity, educational tasteful always tied to some aspect of Calloway history or values. "Yes, you are family," Bryn acknowledged, "but this event is different. There will be cameras, reporters, business people from around the world. It's not a place for children." "Ainsley's going," Elliot countered. Immediately. "Ainsley lives with your father. Her presence is expected." Even to her own ears, Bryn's reasoning sounded weak. The truth was more complicated. The christening represented exactly what she feared most: the public unveiling of the twins as Calloway heirs, orchestrated by Vivian for maximum impact. The invitation had explicitly mentioned a special family announcement that Bryn strongly suspected involved formal recognition of the boy's place in the Calloway lineage. "I thought you wanted us to know, Dad," Milo said, his perceptive gaze making Bryn feel transparent. "Now he wants to show us something important to him, and you're saying no." The gentle accusation stung precisely because it contained a kernel of truth. She had encouraged their relationship with Lawson, had supported their growing comfort with calling him Dad, alongside their deepening bond with Griffin. Yet here she was, creating barriers. "Let me talk to your father again," she finally conceded. "Maybe we can find a compromise." The compromise, when it materialized later that day, came from an unexpected source. Thea Calloway called Bryn directly, the first time Lawson's wife had reached out without her husband as intermediary. "I understand your concerns about the christening," Thea said, her voice warm but direct. "The press, the corporate politics, Vivian's flair for dramatic announcements. It's a lot, especially for the boy's first public appearance." Bryn was momentarily taken aback by this frank assessment. "Yes, exactly." "What if we separated the events?" Thea suggested. "The boys could tour the ship privately with Lawson the day before. No press, no business associates, just family. Ainsley would love to show her brothers around. She's been practicing her tour guide spiel for days." The solution was elegant in its simplicity. The twins would get their eagerly anticipated ship visit while avoiding the public spectacle. "That could work," Bryn admitted, surprised by the thoughtfulness of the offer. "Vivian won't be thrilled," Thea added with a hint of dry humor. "But she's not the only Calloway with a say in family matters anymore." Something in this statement, the implicit acknowledgement of Vivian's controlling nature, the subtle positioning of herself and Bryn as potential allies, made Bryn reassess her perception of Lawson's wife. "Thank you, Thea. I appreciate you reaching out." "The boys are important to Lawson," Thea replied simply, "which makes figuring this out important to me." After arranging the details of the private tour, Bryn called Griffin at the clinic to update him. "I think I just had a moment of actual communication with Thea Calloway," she said, still processing the conversation. "The mythical cowwife speaks," Griffin teased. "And she's not what I expected. Practical, direct, and apparently not entirely under Vivian's thumb." "A potential ally in the Calloway camp," Griffin suggested. "That could be valuable." The private ship tour was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Lawson would collect the twins from school and return them to Griffin's house afterward, where they were spending the weekend while Bryn attended a healthcare management conference in Portland. "Are you sure you'll be okay with all 3 kids?" Bryn asked Griffin as she packed her overnight bag Thursday evening. "The boys are still going to be excited from the ship tour, and you know how Elliot gets when he's overstimulated." Griffin's expression was one of exaggerated offense. "I've managed twin tornadoes for 4 years now. I think I can handle one more evening." Bryn smiled, leaning into him. "I know you can, I just worry," he finished for her, "particularly when Callaway plans are involved." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows your 'I'm concerned about Callaway machinations' face." "Intimately." He kissed her forehead. "Go to your conference, focus on boring healthcare management things. The children will survive one ship tour without your protective presence." Friday morning brought unseasonably heavy rain, turning this Seattle commute into its usual soggy chaos. Bryn dropped the twins at school with reminders about behavior expectations for the afternoon's excursion, then headed to the clinic for a half-day before her drive to Portland. She was reviewing patient files when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Harrison Gray, Mrs. Callaway's attorney. She's requesting an urgent meeting this morning regarding a matter concerning your sons. Please call at your earliest convenience." Bryn stared at the message, alarm bells ringing. In 7 years, Harrison had contacted her exactly once to confirm the finalization of her divorce. For him to reach out now at Vivian's behest on the very day of the ship tour, she called the number immediately. Harrison's voice was precisely as she remembered, professionally detached with underlying discomfort. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for returning my call promptly. Mrs. Callaway would like to meet with you at her residence at 11 a.m. "That's not possible," Bryn replied firmly. "I'm working until noon, then driving to Portland for a conference. Mrs. Callaway believes the matter is of sufficient importance to warrant rearranging your schedule." Bryn's patience, already thin, snapped. "Harrison, I haven't taken orders from Vivian Callaway in 7 years, and I'm not starting now. What exactly is this urgent matter?" A pause. "It concerns certain educational and financial provisions Mrs. Callaway wishes to establish for Milo and Elliot. Matters that would benefit from your input." Translation. Vivian had prepared some legal document regarding the boys and wanted Bryn's signature before she left town. "If Vivian has proposals regarding my sons, she can email them to me. I'll review them when I return from my conference." Bryn's tone made it clear the conversation was ending. "And Harrison, in the future, please respect normal business communications. Protocols. Urgent meetings should be reserved for actual emergencies." After hanging up, Bryn called Lawson, who answered on the 3rd ring. "Did you know your mother is trying to arrange some kind of emergency meeting with me about the boys?" she asked without preamble. "What?" No, Lawson sounded genuinely surprised. "What kind of meeting?" "Something about educational and financial provisions she wants to establish. Harrison just called me." A heavy sigh came through the line. "I'll talk to her. This isn't the approach we agreed on." "You agreed on an approach?" Bryn's suspicion deepened. "Regarding what exactly?" "It's complicated. Mother has some ideas about the boys' future education, about integrating them more formally into the family structure. Nothing binding, just options to consider." The vague explanation did nothing to ease Bryn's concern. "Lawson, we've been doing well with our current arrangement. The boys are happy, they're adjusting to having you in their lives. Why complicate things with legal documents and formal integration?" "It's not just Mother," Lawson admitted after a pause. "I've been thinking about it too. They're Callaway's Bryn. That comes with certain considerations." "They're children." Bryn countered, "who need stability and love more than they need trust funds and legacy planning." The conversation ended with mutual frustration, Lawson promising to speak with Vivian about her timing, and approach Bryn reiterating that no decisions about the twins' future would be made without thorough discussion between all parental figures involved. Despite Lawson's assurances that the ship tour would proceed as planned, Bryn felt uneasy as she drove toward Portland that afternoon. She called Griffin from the road, updating him on the morning's developments. Keep your phone handy, she instructed. If anything seems off when Lawson drops them off, I'll call you immediately, Griffin promised. But try not to worry. Lawson's been consistent with the boys. I don't think he'd use them as pawns in whatever game Vivian's playing. Rinnie wanted to believe that. Over the past month, she'd seen genuine affection develop between Lawson and the twins. He'd been respectful of boundaries, communicative about plans, even supportive of Griffin's role in their lives. But she'd also seen the old patterns reasserting themselves, Lawson's initial resistance to Vivian's suggestions gradually giving way as she applied steady pressure. The familiar dance of attempted independence, followed by reluctant capitulation that had characterized their marriage. The conference keynote was halfway through when Bryn's phone vibrated with an incoming call from Griffin. She slipped out of the ballroom to answer. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Maybe nothing," Griffin replied, his tone careful. "The boys just got here full of stories about the ship, but they're saying they met with a judge afterward, at Vivian's house." Bryn's blood ran cold. A judge. What kind of judge? They weren't clear on that part. Something about making sure they're Callaways forever. Lawson left quickly after dropping them off, mentioned something about needing to call you. "Put Milo on the phone," Bryn requested, her mind racing. Milo's voice came through excited, but with an undertone of confusion. "Mom, the ship was amazing. It's as big as our whole school." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," Bryn said, keeping her voice steady. "Griffin mentioned you met someone after the tour at Grandmother Vivian's house. A lady in a black robe. Dad said she's a special kind of helper who makes sure families stay together properly." "And what did this lady do?" "She asked us questions, like are we happy knowing Dad and Ainsley, and do we understand what being Callaways means?" "What else happened at Grandmother Vivian's?" "We had cookies, and we signed our names on some papers with lots of writing. Dad said it was practice for when we're businessmen someday." Milo's voice dropped to a whisper. "Elliot got chocolate on his paper and Grandmother wasn't happy." "Is Dad still there?" "No, he left after we signed the papers. He seemed kinda sad." "Or mad? I couldn't tell." After reassuring Milo that everything was fine and promising to call before bedtime, Bryn ended the call and immediately tried Lawson. His phone went straight to voicemail. Next, she called Thea, who answered, sounding equally concerned. "I just got home from work," Thea explained. "Lawson cancelled the car that was supposed to bring him and Ainsley back from the ship tour, said they were taking a detour." "To Vivian's house," Bryn supplied grimly. "With my sons, where apparently they met with a judge and signed papers." A sharp intake of breath. "That wasn't the plan at all. He promised me he wouldn't let Vivian rush things." "What things, Thea? What exactly is going on?" A pause. "You should talk to Lawson." "I'm trying. He's not answering." Thea's voice hardened with resolve. "Then I suggest you call Vivian directly. If she's orchestrated some legal maneuver involving your children without proper consent, you deserve answers." The suggestion, and Thea's evident frustration with the situation, crystallized something for Bryn. Perhaps Lawson's wife was more of an ally than she'd realized. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for being straight with me." "We're raising siblings," Thea replied simply. "That should mean something." Vivian answered on the second ring, her tone perfectly cordial, as if expecting the call. "Bryn, how lovely to hear from you. How's Portland?" "What did you do?" Bryn demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. "What papers did my sons sign today?" "Nothing binding, I assure you," Vivian replied smoothly. "Merely preliminary acknowledgement of paternity and inheritance standing. Judge Winters was kind enough to formalize the documentation as a favor to me." "You had no right." Bryn's voice shook with barely controlled anger. "No legal right and no moral right." "On the contrary," Vivian countered, her tone hardening. "As their paternal grandmother, I have every right to ensure my grandson's future interests are protected, particularly when their mother seems determined to deny their heritage." "I've denied them nothing," Bryn objected. "I facilitated their relationship with Lawson with you, with their half-sister, while keeping them firmly separate from the advantages their name should provide," Vivian said dismissively. Living in that modest neighborhood, attending a public school, being raised by a man with no legal or biological connection to them. The casual cruelty of this last remark, the dismissal of Griffin's role in their lives, ignited Bryn's fury. Where is Lawson now? Dealing with his own crisis of conscience, I imagine, Vivian said with a sigh. My son has always struggled with necessary decisions. It's why he needs guidance. You mean control, Bryn corrected. You've never guided Lawson. You've manipulated him just as you're trying to manipulate my sons. Our perspectives differ, Vivian replied coolly. But the reality remains, Milo and Elliot are Callaways. Today's documentation simply acknowledges what was already true. After ending the call, Bryn stood in the hotel corridor, trembling with anger and fear. Whatever documents Vivian had orchestrated, whatever judge had been involved, she needed to understand the legal implications immediately. She called her family law attorney in Seattle, briefly explaining the situation and requesting emergency consultation. Then she texted Griffin, "Coming home now. Don't let anyone take the boys, not even Lawson. We'll explain when I get there." As she gathered her belongings and checked out of the hotel, her phone finally buzzed with a text from Lawson. "We need to talk. What happened today wasn't what I agreed to. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I'll explain everything." The drive back to Seattle was a blur of rain-slicked highways and escalating worry. Whatever Vivian had set in motion, whatever lines had been crossed today, one thing was painfully clear: the delicate balance they'd been building had just been shattered. The custody battle Bryn had feared from the moment she saw Lawson in that park had finally arrived, not through direct confrontation, but through Vivian's calculating manipulation of legal technicalities and Lawson's persistent inability to stand firm against his mother's influence. As Seattle's lights appeared through the rain-spattered windshield, Bryn made a silent promise to her sons and to herself. This time she wouldn't be outmaneuvered. This time she would fight with every resource at her disposal. The Callaway legacy might be powerful, but it had never faced a mother defending her children against its grasp. The Callaway shipping headquarters loomed against the gray Seattle morning, its gleaming glass facade reflecting the cloudy sky. Bryn strode through the imposing lobby, the security guard nodding her through after a brief call to Lawson's office. She had arrived home late the previous night to find Griffin and the twins asleep, the house peaceful, despite the storm brewing in her mind. Her family law attorney had called back with concerning news. Judge Evelyn Winters was indeed a real family court judge, and while any documents signed without Bryn's presence or consent would be legally questionable, they could still create complications. The elevator whisked her to the executive floor where Harrison Gray was waiting, his expression grave. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted her formally. "Mr. Callaway is expecting you. This way, please." Lawson's office occupied the building's northeast corner, offering panoramic views of Elliott Bay. He stood as she entered, looking haggard, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of a sleepless night. "Bryn," he began, but she cut him off. "What did you let her do?" The question emerged with quiet intensity. "What exactly did my children sign yesterday?" Lawson gestured to the conference table, where several legal documents were spread out. Preliminary acknowledgement of paternity, declaration of inheritance rights, educational trust acceptance. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Mother had them prepared weeks ago. I told her we needed to discuss everything with you first to proceed carefully. Yet somehow my 7-year-old sons ended up signing legal papers in front of a judge, without my knowledge or consent." Bryn's voice remained controlled but ice-cold. "Explain that, Lawson." He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every day of his 43 years. "The ship tour went as planned. The boys loved it. Afterward, Mother called, invited us for refreshments at her house. Said she had a surprise for the children." He shook his head. "I should have known better, but Ainsley was excited to show them the garden, and it seemed harmless. Until Judge Winters appeared." "Yes." Lawson's mouth tightened. "Mother introduced her as a family friend who handles special paperwork. Before I realized what was happening, she was asking the boys questions, having them sign documents." "And you didn't stop it?" Bryn demanded, incredulous. "I tried," he insisted. Mother took me aside, said everything was already arranged, that backing out now would confuse the children, that this was necessary to secure their future. The familiar pattern was painfully evident, Vivian creating situations where opposition seemed more disruptive than compliance, leveraging Lawson's lifelong habit of yielding to her stronger will. "You promised me," Bryn said, her voice finally breaking. "You promised this would be on our terms, yours and mine, that we would make decisions about the boys together." "I know." Shame colored his features. "After it happened, I confronted her. We had the worst argument of our lives. I told her she'd crossed a line, that she had no right to orchestrate legal maneuvers involving your sons." "Our sons," Bryn corrected automatically, then laughed without humor. "Isn't that ironic? For months you've been reminding me there. Our sons, not just mine. Now I'm the one saying it." Lawson looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "You're right, and as their father I failed them yesterday. Failed you too." The admission, so direct, so unqualified, caught Bryn off guard. During their marriage, Lawson had rarely acknowledged his mother's manipulation, had never accepted responsibility for enabling it. "What do these documents actually mean?" she asked, gesturing to the papers. "Legally speaking, according to Harrison, not much without your signature," Lawson admitted. "They establish intent, create a record of acknowledgement, but they don't override your parental rights." "Then why the elaborate charade? Why involve a judge, have the boys sign?" Lawson's expression darkened. "Because Mother never does anything without multiple layers of purpose. The documents themselves may not be legally binding, but they create precedent. Evidence that the boys have been acknowledged as Callaways, that they've participated in family legal proceedings." "Building a case?" Bryn realized cold dread settling in her stomach. "For what shared custody?" "I don't know," Lawson admitted. "Mother doesn't share her full strategies even with me, especially when she suspects I might object." Bryn paced to the windows, staring out at the shipping terminals visible in the distance. The enormous Callaway vessels looked like toys from this height, yet they represented the empire that had always taken precedence over human connections. "This has to stop, Lawson," she said finally, turning back to face him. "I won't have my sons, our sons, caught in Vivian's manipulation. They deserve better from all of us." Lawson stood, moving closer, but maintaining a respectful distance. "I agree. That's why I've made a decision." He took a deep breath. "I'm stepping down as CEO." "What?" Bryn stared at him in disbelief. "Temporarily, at least. I've informed the board that I need a leave of absence for family reasons." His shoulders straightened as if unburdened. "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing my children over the Callaway legacy." "Your mother will fight this," Bryn said, studying his face for signs of wavering. "She already is." A grim smile crossed his features. "She spent 3 hours in this office last night, telling me exactly how I'm destroying everything generations of Callaways have built." "And Thea Ainsley. Support my decision completely." His expression softened. "Thea has been telling me for years that Mother's influence isn't healthy. I just wasn't ready to hear it." Bryn sat down, processing this unexpected development. "What does this mean for the boys? It means I want to be their father, not the Callaway heir producing Callaway heirs." Lawson joined her at the table. "I've asked Harrison to draft new documents, proper, transparent ones that protect the boys' interests without trapping them in obligations. No Callaway strings attached. And the paperwork they signed yesterday, being destroyed as we speak," Lawson assured her. "Harrison is handling it personally." Bryn wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this newfound resolve would hold against Vivian's inevitable counterattack, yet experience had taught her caution. "I need time to think," she said finally, "and to consult my own attorney." Of course, Lawson's acceptance came without argument, another departure from the past. "Take whatever time you need. The boys are welcome to visit as planned this weekend, but if you'd rather postpone—" "No," Bryn decided. "They've been looking forward to it. Breaking routine would just confuse them." As she prepared to leave, Lawson asked quietly, "Do you think we can fix this, find a way forward that works for everyone?" The vulnerability in his question reminded her of younger days before. Vivian's influence had calcified his defenses. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but trying, really trying, is a start." Outside the Callaway building, rain had given way to weak sunshine breaking through clouds, a meteorological metaphor too obvious to ignore. Bryn called Griffin, updating him as she walked toward her car. "He's standing up to her," Griffin sounded, cautiously optimistic. "That's unexpected." "Yes," Bryn agreed. "The question is whether it will last." "People can change," Griffin reminded her, "even Callaway men." "Maybe," Bryn conceded, "but Vivian won't let go without a fight, and she fights to win." As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed. With a text from a number she recognized as Vivian's. "This situation requires mature conversation, not emotional reactions. Join me for tea this afternoon. We should discuss our grandson's future directly, woman to woman." The presumption that their grandson's future was something to be negotiated between Vivian and herself might have infuriated Bryn in the past. Now it simply confirmed what she already knew in Vivian's world. Everyone was a piece to be moved on the board, even her own son. "No, thank you," she replied simply. "Any discussions regarding my sons will include all parental figures, me, Lawson, and Griffin." The reply came swiftly. "Dr. Fletcher is neither parent nor family. This matter concerns Callaways." Bryn's response was immediate and final. "Griffin is the man who has helped raise my children for 4 years. He is family in every way that matters. This conversation is over." As she drove home, Bryn realized something fundamental had shifted. For years, she had feared Vivian's power, her wealth, her connections, her ruthless determination. But watching Lawson finally stand against his mother's manipulation had clarified something important. Vivian's influence existed primarily because others permitted it. The weekend visit proceeded with surprising normalcy. Lawson picked up the boys Saturday morning, promising to return them Sunday evening. Griffin and Bryn used the child-free time to discuss next steps. "If Lawson actually maintains his position, this could work," Griffin said as they walked along the waterfront. Shared parenting time holidays together, the boys benefiting from both family environments. "And if he doesn't?" Bryn challenged. "If Vivian pulls him back into line," Griffin squeezed her hand, "then we deal with that together. But let's not defeat a positive development with negative assumptions." Sunday evening brought Lawson and the twins back to Griffin's house as promised. The boys tumbled out of the car full of stories about their weekend adventure, a sailing trip on Lawson's small yacht, fish and chips at the marina board games with Ainsley. Lawson hung back as they raced inside to show Griffin their seashell collection. "They had a good time," he told Bryn. "No Callaway business discussions, no surprise legal documents, just being a family." "Thank you," Bryn said simply, "for keeping your word." As he turned to leave, Lawson hesitated. "Mother's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. She's mobilizing allies to challenge my leave of absence. What will you do?" His smile held unexpected conviction. "Stand my ground for once in my life." After he left, Bryn found Griffin and the twins in the living room, arranging shells on the coffee table. Watching them, these 3 people who formed the bedrock of her daily life, she felt a surge of protective determination. Whatever storm Vivian might unleash next, they would weather it together. What she couldn't know was that Vivian Callaway was at that very moment reviewing surveillance, photos of Griffin's house, property records of their neighborhood, and detailed reports on the local school district's performance metrics, all part of a comprehensive strategy to prove that the Callaway legacy offered advantages her grandsons were being denied. The battle lines had been drawn. The question now was whether Lawson's newfound courage would withstand his mother's lifelong hold over him, and whether the family bonds Bryn had carefully nurtured would prove stronger than the Callaway legacy. The Callaway shipping boardroom buzzed with tense energy. Executives shifted in leather chairs, eyes darting between Lawson at one end of the polished table and Vivian at the other. The emergency meeting had been in session for nearly 2 hours, and the power struggle was evident to everyone present. "The Tokyo expansion requires leadership continuity," Vivian was saying, her voice carrying the practiced authority of decades at the helm. "A CEO absence now sends precisely the wrong message to our Asian partners. The executive team is more than capable of maintaining operations, Lawson countered evenly. Harrison has prepared a detailed transition plan that addresses all ongoing projects. Plans on paper don't replace relationships built over years, Vivian dismissed. Ito-san specifically requested your personal involvement. Lawson met his mother's gaze directly. Then Ito-san will understand when I explain that family matters require my attention. Family matters, Vivian repeated, her tone sharpening. You mean abandoning your responsibilities to the Calloway legacy, to your father's memory, because of a sudden crisis of conscience regarding children you didn't know existed until recently. The boardroom fell silent. Even Vivian's most loyal supporters looked uncomfortable at this direct reference to what most considered a private family matter. Mother Lawson said quietly, "This is neither the time nor the place for that discussion." On the contrary, Vivian pressed, the board deserves complete transparency. Your decision to step back from leadership is directly tied to your ex-wife's influence over access to your sons. The Calloway future is at stake. Marcus Reynolds, the longest-serving board member, after Vivian cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table the personal aspects and focus on the operational transition plan. The personal is operational where this company is concerned, Vivian insisted. Calloway Shipping has always been family-led. The legacy continues through blood. And it will, Lawson said firmly. But legacy isn't just about continuity of control, Mother. It's about values. The values I want my children, all my children, to inherit. Sentiment, Vivian dismissed. Business requires clearer thinking. Does it? Lawson's question hung in the air. Or does that clear thinking just provide convenient justification for treating people as assets rather than human beings, the C? Boardroom stirred at this direct challenge. Vivian's expression hardened as she realized the momentum was shifting against her. I move to vote on the temporary leadership transition, Marcus suggested, visibly eager to diffuse the tension. The vote passed 7-3 with Vivian and her two closest allies opposed. As the meeting adjourned, executives filed out with murmured, "Congratulations to Lawson on his family priorities." Only Vivian remained her rigid posture, betraying the depth of her anger. "You've made a grave mistake," she said when they were alone. "One that affects more than just yourself." "I don't see it that way," Lawson replied. "For the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what matters most." "The company matters," Vivian snapped. "The legacy matters. Your grandfather is dead," Lawson finished, "as is father. And neither of them managed to find happiness, despite all their success, all their wealth, all their power. I watched father work himself into an early grave trying to meet your expectations, Mother. I won't do the same." Vivian rose, gathering her belongings with precise movements. "You've aligned yourself with Bryn against your own mother, against your own heritage." "No." Lawson shook his head. "I've aligned myself with my children, all of them. Milo, Elliot, and Ainsley deserve better than what we've given them, better than what I received." Her eyes narrowed. Meaning. Children need parents who are present, who listen, who support rather than control. Lawson stood his ground. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, Mother. I don't want my sons living with that same burden. So you'll throw away generations of careful planning instead." Vivian's voice was ice. "I had such hopes for the twins. Bright boys with Calloway blood. They deserve every advantage." "They deserve childhood," Lawson countered. "They deserve to be valued for who they are, not what they represent to a corporate legacy." "You'll regret this," Vivian warned, moving toward the door. "When you realize what you've sacrificed, what you've denied your sons, you'll remember this conversation." After she left, Lawson remained in the empty boardroom, the weight of the confrontation settling over him. For the first time since his father's death, he directly opposed his mother in the heart of Calloway territory, and won. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. He called Thea, who answered immediately. "How did it go?" "The board supported my leave," he told her. "Mother did not." "I'm proud of you," Thea said simply. The word struck him with unexpected force. Pride, not for a business achievement or financial success, but for standing up for himself, for his family. It felt unfamiliar, but deeply right. "I need to see the boys," he said suddenly, "to explain things before Mother tries to spin her own narrative." "Bryn might not appreciate an unscheduled visit," Thea cautioned. "I know, I'll call first." Across town, Bryn was in Griffin's backyard helping the twins with a science project when her phone rang with Lawson's number. "Something's happened," he said without preamble. "The board meeting with Mother, it got too intense. I'm worried she might reach out to the boys directly." Bryn's spine stiffened. What exactly happened? "I stood my ground. The leave was approved. Mother made it. Clear she considers this a betrayal of the Calloway legacy." He paused. "I'd like to come over to talk to the boys myself before she tries to contact them." After a brief discussion with Griffin, Bryn agreed. 30 minutes later, Lawson arrived, looking simultaneously exhausted and energized. "Dad," Elliot called, running to greet him. "We're making a volcano. Want to help?" "I'd love to." Lawson smiled, though his eyes sought Bryn's over the boy's head. While Griffin supervised the volcano experiment, Bryn led Lawson to the kitchen for coffee and privacy. "You really did it," she observed, studying him. "You stood up to her." "Yes," he confirmed, probably for the first time effectively. "What happened?" As Lawson recounted the boardroom confrontation, Bryn realized she was seeing a version of him she'd glimpsed only fleetingly during their marriage, the man he might have been without Vivian's constant influence. "She won't." "Stop," Bryn warned. "You know that." "I know," he agreed grimly. "Which is why I wanted to talk to the boys today, to explain that there might be confusion ahead." They called the twins inside, settling around the kitchen table for what Lawson described as an important family talk. With remarkable clarity for their age, he explained that he and their grandmother had different ideas about family, and that sometimes adults disagreed even within families. "Grandmother Vivian believes very strongly in the Calloway name and what it means," he told them, "and that's not wrong. Family history is important, but sometimes she focuses so much on the Calloway legacy that she forgets about the Calloway people." "Like you?" Milo asked perceptively. "Yes," Lawson admitted. "Like me. For a long time, I let grandmother make decisions that should have been mine. Like about Mom." Elliot's question was innocent but piercing. Lawson met Bryn's eyes briefly before answering. "Yes, like about your mom. I made choices I regret because I wasn't brave enough to stand up for what was right." The simple acknowledgement, spoken directly to his sons with Bryn present, carried healing power neither of them had anticipated. "Grandmother might call you," Lawson continued carefully. "She might say things about me, about your mom, about Griffin. She might make promises or suggestions about your future. If that happens, I want you to remember that you're kids. Wonderful. Special kids, but still kids. You don't have to make grown-up decisions or worry about grown-up problems. Like being Calloway whatevers," Elliot said clearly, recalling Vivian's frequent references to their heritage. "Exactly," Griffin chimed in from the doorway. "Being a Calloway is part of who you are, but it's not all you are." After the conversation, the twins returned to their volcano project with Griffin, while Bryn walked Lawson to his car. "Thank you," she said simply, "for being honest with them, for standing with me instead of against me." "I should have done it years ago," he admitted, "before I lost you." The statement hung between them, not a bid to rekindle what was gone, but an acknowledgement of what might have been under different circumstances. "We can't change the past," Bryn said gently, "but we can build something better for the boys. Future." As Lawson drove away, Bryn felt an unexpected lightness. For the first time since seeing him in the park that day, she believed they might actually forge a healthy co-parenting relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than power struggles. That evening, as she and Griffin prepared dinner, her phone rang with Vivian's number. She answered on speaker so Griffin could hear. "You've poisoned my son against me," Vivian stated without greeting. "Turned him against his birthright, his responsibilities." "Lawson made his own decisions," Bryn replied calmly, "as adults do." "This temporary rebellion changes nothing," Vivian continued. "The boys remain Calloways. Their future remains tied to the legacy, whether you acknowledge it or not. Their future is their own, Bryn countered, not yours to dictate. Such naivety, Vivian's voice dripped with condescension. Do you truly believe you can provide what they need, the connections, the opportunities, the preparation for leadership? That is their birthright. Griffin moved closer to Bryn, his presence a silent support. What they need, Bryn replied steadily, is love without conditions, respect for their choices, freedom to become whoever they're meant to be. Can you provide that, Vivian? The silence stretched for several seconds before Vivian spoke again. This isn't over. Actually, Bryn said with newfound confidence, I think it is. After hanging up, she turned to Griffin, who was watching her with undisguised admiration. That was impressive, he said, pulling her into an embrace. It felt liberating, Bryn admitted. Like I've finally stopped being afraid of her. That night, as they lay in bed discussing the day's events, Griffin propped himself up on one elbow. You know, with all this talk of legacy, I've been thinking about, Bryn prompted when he hesitated. About making our own official, he said simply. I love you. I love the boys. I want us to be a family, legally, permanently. The proposal, delivered without grand gestures but with absolute sincerity, brought tears to Bryn's eyes. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Griffin smiled. Yes, marry me, Bryn. Let's build our own legacy, one based on love rather than obligation. Her answer was immediate and certain, yes. As they sealed the promise with a kiss, neither could have predicted the seismic events the next day would bring. Events that would permanently alter the Calloway dynasty and finally resolve the power struggle that had shadowed their lives for so long. Morning light filtered through the windows of Vivian Calloway's lakeside mansion, illuminating the elegant sitting room where she sat reviewing documents. At 75, even personal setbacks were approached with strategic precision. If Lawson wouldn't protect the Calloway legacy, she would take matters into her own hands. The doorbell interrupted her concentration. She wasn't expecting visitors, and her housekeeper had the day off. Rising with a slight grimace, her arthritis was troubling her more these days. She moved to answer it herself. Lawson stood on the doorstep, his expression grave. We need to talk, Mother. I'm rather busy, she said coolly, but stepped aside to let him enter. This can't wait, he insisted, following her to the sitting room. His gaze fell on the papers, spread across her antique desk. What are those options? Vivian replied vaguely, gathering the documents into a folder. Since you've temporarily abandoned your responsibilities, I'm exploring alternatives. Regarding the company or my sons, Lawson's direct question hung in the air. Before Vivian could respond, the doorbell rang again. Annoyance flickered across her features. Apparently I'm hosting a morning reception I wasn't informed of. She opened the door to find Thea standing there, Ainsley's hand in hers. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit, Thea said pleasantly. Ainsley wanted to see her grandmother. Of course. Vivian's tone warmed as she bent to greet her granddaughter. What a lovely surprise. Thea's gaze met Lawson's over Vivian's, shoulder a silent communication passing between them. As they settled in the sitting room, the doorbell chimed a third time. Popular this morning, Vivian observed dryly, rising once more. This time Bryn stood on the threshold, Griffin beside her, the twins peering around them with curious expressions. What is this? Vivian demanded, her composure finally slipping. Family meeting, Lawson said simply. All of us together. I did not authorize. You don't need to authorize family gatherings, Mother, Lawson interrupted gently. That's not how healthy families work. The gathered group moved to Vivian's spacious living room, the twins immediately gravitating toward Ainsley, the adults arranging themselves with deliberate positioning. Vivian stood rather than sat, maintaining what height advantage she could. If this is some sort of intervention, she began coldly, I'm not interested. Not an intervention, Bryn corrected. A reset, a new beginning. We've all been pulled into patterns that aren't working, Lawson explained. Patterns of control, of fear, of legacy preservation at the expense of actual relationships. Vivian's expression hardened. The legacy you so casually dismiss built everything you have, everything your children will inherit. And we're grateful. For that, Thea spoke up. But inheritance isn't just about money or position, it's about values, the values we want these children to carry forward. Which is precisely my concern, Vivian countered. The values that built the Calloway name. Control isn't a value, Mother, Lawson interrupted quietly. Neither is manipulation or conditional love. The words landed like physical blows. Vivian's perfect posture faltered slightly. Everything I've done has been for this family, she said, her voice suddenly older, more vulnerable. For you, Lawson. For the future. I know, he acknowledged. In your way, you've always been trying to secure what you thought was best. But that's the problem. Griffin spoke for the first time, his tone gentle, despite the confrontational setting. You decided what was best without considering what might actually make your family happy. Vivian's gaze swept over him dismissively. And you believe you understand my family better than I do. I understand that legacy is meaningless if the people carrying it forward are unhappy, Griffin replied steadily. In the momentary silence that followed, Milo approached Vivian, his expression thoughtful. Grandmother, are you unhappy? The simple question, delivered with a child's directness, caught Vivian off guard. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she found herself without a strategic response. I concern myself with matters more important than personal happiness, she finally managed. That's sad, Elliot concluded, joining his brother. Mum says being happy is super important. More important than being rich or famous. A convenient philosophy, Vivian remarked, when one lacks wealth or status. Mother, Lawson's voice held warning, the boys aren't pawns in this discussion. No, Vivian agreed unexpectedly, they're Calloways, future leaders. They deserve to understand what that means. And they will, Bryn said, moving to stand behind her sons, along with understanding that their value isn't tied to their last name or their future positions, that they're loved unconditionally by all of us. Including you, grandmother, Milo added earnestly, even when you're kind of scary sometimes. A startled laugh escaped Vivian, perhaps the most genuine reaction they'd witnessed from her. For a brief moment her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the lonely woman beneath the matriarch's armor. I'm not accustomed to this sort of family discussion, she admitted stiffly. None of us are, Lawson acknowledged, but we're trying something new, for the children's sake. What followed was a conversation unlike any the Calloway family had experienced, honest, occasionally painful, but ultimately healing. The children were sent to play in Vivian's immaculate garden, while the adults established new boundaries, new expectations, new ways of relating that preserved the positive aspects of the Calloway heritage, while discarding the harmful patterns. I'm selling the mansion in Boston, Lawson announced at one point. The house holds too many memories of control and unhappiness. Vivian's sharp intake of breath demonstrated how deeply this decision affected her. The family has roots there, she protested. Generations of history. History isn't confined to buildings, Lawson countered gently. We'll preserve what matters, the photographs, the documents, the stories, but the fresh start needs to be complete. As the conversation progressed, something subtle shifted in Vivian's demeanor. The rigid certainty that had defined her for decades began to show hairline fractures. Not surrender. Vivian Calloway would never surrender, but perhaps the beginning of reassessment. I need time, she said finally, to consider these proposals. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. From Vivian, it represented unprecedented willingness to adapt. In the weeks that followed, change came gradually but unmistakably. Vivian stepped back from daily operations at Calloway Shipping, taking an emeritus position that acknowledged her contributions while limiting her direct authority. The Boston mansion was sold with significant proceeds donated to educational foundations supporting first-generation college students, a symbolic redistribution of Calloway resources that made headlines in financial circles. Most surprisingly, Vivian purchased a small cottage on Lopez Island, a ferry ride from Seattle. For reflection, she explained when questioned. Those close to the family understood the unstated truth: she was removing herself from the center of power, creating space for new patterns to emerge without her constant presence. 6 months later, Bryn and Griffin's wedding took place in his Backyard, the same space where they had first confronted Vivian. The guest list included Lawson, Thea, and Ainsley, who had become regular fixtures in the twins' lives. Even Vivian attended, though she maintained a certain reserve that suggested ongoing internal adjustment. During the reception, she approached Bryn, offering a small, elegantly wrapped package. A wedding gift, she explained, something personal rather than financial. Inside, Bryn found a delicate silver locket containing a miniature family photograph, not of Calloway's past, but of Milo and Elliot from their most recent birthday. "They are extraordinary boys," Vivian said quietly. "You've raised them well. Different choices than I would have made, but effective ones." From Vivian, this constituted high praise indeed. "Thank you," Bryn replied sincerely. "They're lucky to have your influence in their lives. The good parts of it," she added with gentle honesty. Vivian's smile acknowledged the qualification. "I'm learning to distinguish between those parts myself, a challenging process at my age." Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Lawson found Griffin near the makeshift bar. "Happy looks good on her," he observed, watching Bryn laugh with friends across the yard. "Yes," Griffin agreed. "It does." "I wanted to thank you," Lawson said, the words clearly difficult for him, "for being there for them when I wasn't, for loving them without conditions." "They make it easy," Griffin replied, echoing Bryn's words from long ago. The two men, once potential rivals, now unexpected allies, shared a moment of understanding that transcended their complicated connection. As the evening drew to a close, the twins insisted on a photograph of what Elliot called their whole huge family. Bryn and Griffin, Lawson and Thea Ainsley between the boys and Vivian, standing somewhat stiffly at the edge of the frame. The resulting image captured something remarkable, the creation of a new kind of family, built not on traditional structures or expectations, but on conscious choice and hard-won understanding. 1 year later, Bryn sat on the porch of Griffin's house, their house now, watching the twins play basketball with their father. Lawson's leave of absence had evolved into a permanent restructuring of his role at Callaway Shipping, less CEO, more strategic advisor, with significantly more time for his family. Griffin emerged from the house carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Good game?" he asked, settling beside her. "Competitive," she smiled. "Lawson's teaching them his jump shot." They sat in comfortable silence, witnesses to the scene neither could have imagined when Lawson first reappeared in their lives. "Vivian called yesterday," Bryn mentioned. "She's hosting Thanksgiving at the cottage. Invited all of us." Griffin's eyebrows rose. "Including me, the medical profession interloper." "By name," Bryn confirmed with a laugh. "Progress, right?" "Miraculous progress," he agreed. From the basketball court, Elliot's triumphant shout drew their attention. He had just scored against his father, Milo, providing the assist. The twins high-fived with the seamless coordination that had always been uniquely theirs. "They're thriving," Griffin observed, "with all of us, even Vivian. Because they know they're loved for themselves," Bryn said simply. "Not for their name or their potential or their place in some predetermined legacy." As evening approached, Lawson joined them on the porch while the boys continued playing. "They've got Callaway competitiveness," he observed with pride. "And Mitchell creativity," Bryn added, "and Fletcher compassion." She smiled at Griffin. "A good combination," Lawson acknowledged. "Better than any single legacy could provide." The conversation turned to future plans, school activities, holiday arrangements, the easy coordination of blended family logistics they'd gradually mastered. No longer adversaries fighting for control, they had become partners in the more important project of raising children who felt secure in their complex but loving family structure. Later, after Lawson had left and the twins were in bed, Bryn found herself drawn to the family photograph wall they'd created, images chronicling their journey from the difficult Boston days through the upheaval of Lawson's reappearance to the current state of hard-won harmony. Griffin wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Heavy thoughts." "Grateful ones," she corrected. "I was just thinking about legacy. The Callaway kind." "No," she smiled, turning in his embrace. "The kind we're creating together, the one that values people over power, Love over lineage, choice over obligation. Outside their window, Seattle's lights twinkled against the night sky. Somewhere across the city, Lawson and Thea were probably helping Ainsley with homework. On her island retreat, Vivian was perhaps reviewing company reports or perhaps, in her, gradual evolution, simply enjoying the sunset over the water. The Calloway legacy continued but transformed. What had once been a dynasty built on control and obligation was becoming something more nuanced, more human, a heritage that offered opportunities without demanding conformity, that celebrated its history without being imprisoned by it. And within that transformation, Bryn Griffin and the twins had found their own place, connected to the Calloway name, but not defined by it, enriched by its resources, but not controlled by its expectations. "The legacy we choose," Griffin murmured, echoing her thoughts, "not the one we inherit." "Exactly," Bryn agreed, resting her head against his shoulder. In the quiet house with her family safe and their future secure, she had finally found the peace that wealth and status had never provided, the simple, profound contentment of being loved for exactly who she was. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, as all days did. Vivian would never fully relinquish her vision of the Calloway future. Lawson would continue navigating the complex waters between corporate responsibility and personal fulfillment. The twins would grow, developing their own relationships with both sides of their heritage. But tonight, in this moment, Bryn knew with absolute certainty that they had created something precious and enduring, a legacy of love that would sustain Milo and Elliot long after buildings had crumbled and fortunes had shifted. A legacy not of control but of choice, not of obligation but of freedom. And in the end, that was the only inheritance that truly mattered.